The Book of Ezekiel and the End of Days. The Book of Ezekiel, a prophetic text in the Hebrew Bible, Old Testament, has been a focal point for discussions about eschatology, the theological study of the end of days. Written by the prophet Ezekiel during the Babylonian Exile, circa 6th century BCE, the book contains vivid visions, symbolic actions, and divine oracles. Its messages oscillate between judgment, restoration, and apocalyptic imagery. Below is an exploration of key themes in Ezekiel related to the end times. Key themes and connections to the end of days. 1. Ezekiel's vision of the Valley of Dry Bones, Ezekiel chapter 37. Symbolism. This vision represents the restoration of Israel, where dry bones come to life through God's breath. EndTimes connection. Many interpret this as a metaphor for the resurrection of the dead, a key element in eschatological beliefs. It also symbolizes the renewal of God's covenant and the unification of God's people. Key themes and connections to the end of days. 2. The Gog and Magog prophecy, Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39. Description. Ezekiel foretells a great battle where Gog, a prince of Magog, leads a coalition of nations against Israel. EndTimes connection. Often linked to the ultimate confrontation between good and evil, this prophecy parallels apocalyptic battles described in Revelation chapter 20 verses 7 to 10. Some view it as a literal battle, while others see it as symbolic of God's final victory over evil. Key themes and connections to the end of days. 3. The new temple and the restoration of worship, Ezekiel chapters 40 to 48. Vision. Ezekiel describes a future temple and the reorganization of the land among the tribes of Israel. EndTimes connection. These chapters are seen as a depiction of the Messianic age or the ultimate restoration of God's presence among his people. For Christians, some connect this to the heavenly Jerusalem in Revelation chapter 21. Key themes and connections to the end of days. 4. Judgment on nations, Ezekiel chapters 25 to 32. Message. Ezekiel delivers oracles of judgment against surrounding nations, emphasizing God's sovereignty over all peoples. EndTimes connection. This underscores the universal scope of divine justice, reflecting themes of judgment found in eschatological texts. Key themes and connections to the end of days. 5. The glory of the Lord, Ezekiel chapter 1, 10, 43. Description. Ezekiel's visions of God's glory departing from and returning to the temple highlight God's presence as central to restoration. EndTimes connection. The return of God's glory is associated with the fulfillment of God's promises and the establishment of eternal peace. Interpretations across traditions. Judaism. Ezekiel's prophecies are often viewed in light of the restoration of Israel and the Messianic age. The details about the temple and land distribution are interpreted as literal or symbolic of a future era of divine rule. Interpretations across traditions. Christianity. Many Christians interpret Ezekiel's visions as prefiguring New Testament themes, particularly in Revelation. The Valley of Dry Bones is seen as foreshadowing the resurrection, and the Gog-Magog battle is tied to Christ's second coming. Apocalyptic literature. Ezekiel is a precursor to apocalyptic literature, with its symbolic imagery and cosmic scope influencing later texts like Daniel and Revelation. Modern relevance. Ezekiel's visions continue to inspire theological reflection, art, and discussion about the end times. They are central to eschatological debates about the role of Israel in divine prophecy, symbolism in Christian and Jewish liturgies, contemporary discussions on the nature of divine justice and restoration. What is the Babylonian Exile? The Babylonian Exile refers to a significant period in ancient Jewish history when a large portion of the population of the Kingdom of Judah was forcibly deported to Babylon by the Neo-Babylonian Empire. This event had profound political, religious, and cultural implications for the Jewish people and is a key moment in biblical history. Here is an overview. Historical background. 1. Fall of Jerusalem, 597–586 BCE. The Kingdom of Judah became a vassal state to Babylon under King Nebuchadnezzar II. In 597 BCE, Nebuchadnezzar invaded Judah, exiling King Jehoiakim and the elite of the society to Babylon. After a rebellion led by King Zedekiah, Jerusalem was destroyed in 586 BCE. The city's walls were breached, the Temple of Solomon was razed, and a larger group of Jews was exiled to Babylon. Historical background. 2. Life in exile. Many of the exiled Jews were among the elites, including priests, scribes, and artisans. They were settled in various locations in Babylon, where they retained some autonomy, maintained their community, and practiced their faith, albeit without a central temple. Historical background. 3. Religious and cultural impact. The destruction of the first temple and exile were viewed as punishment for collective sins, a theme explored in biblical texts like Lamentations and Ezekiel. The experience spurred theological reflection, leading to developments in Jewish identity, such as the emphasis on monotheism, the Torah, and synagogue worship. End of the exile. 1. Persian conquest of Babylon, 539 BCE. The Persian king Cyrus the Great conquered Babylon and issued a decree allowing exiled peoples, including the Jews, to return to their homelands. Many Jews returned to Judah, beginning the period known as the Second Temple era with the rebuilding of the Temple in Jerusalem. End of the exile. 2. Significance. Not all Jews returned, and many remained in Babylon, leading to the formation of the Jewish diaspora. The Babylonian exile shaped much of the Hebrew Bible, influencing books like Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezra-Nehemiah. Legacy. The Babylonian exile is remembered as a pivotal moment of loss, resilience, and transformation in Jewish history. It underscored themes of covenant, repentance, and restoration, which continue to resonate in Jewish thought and tradition. Ezekiel and End Times during Babylonian exile period. The relationship between the prophet Ezekiel, the End Times, and the Babylonian exile is a fascinating intersection of biblical history, theology, and prophecy. Here's an overview. Ezekiel and Babylonian exile overview. 1. Historical context. The Babylonian exile. The Babylonian exile, 597–538 BCE, was a pivotal event in Israel's history when the kingdom of Judah was conquered by Babylon. Many Israelites, including Ezekiel, were deported to Babylon. The exile was seen as divine punishment for the people's unfaithfulness to the covenant with Yahweh, as prophesied by earlier prophets like Jeremiah and Isaiah. Ezekiel and Babylonian exile overview. 2. Ezekiel's role during the exile. Ezekiel, a priest turned prophet, was among the first group of exiles taken to Babylon in 597 BCE. His prophetic ministry, approximately 593 to 571 BCE, occurred during the exile and was characterized by judgment oracles, pronouncing judgment on Judah for their sins and idolatry, hope and restoration, foretelling the eventual return of the Israelites to their land and the restoration of a renewed covenant with God. Ezekiel and Babylonian exile overview. 3. Ezekiel and the End Times. Ezekiel's prophecies are deeply symbolic and include visions that have been interpreted as referring to both the immediate context of the exile and eschatological, end times, themes. Key end times themes in Ezekiel. 1. The Valley of Dry Bones, Ezekiel chapter 37, symbolizes the restoration of Israel but is also interpreted as a metaphor for resurrection and hope in an ultimate end times renewal. Ezekiel and Babylonian exile overview. 3. Ezekiel and the End Times. 2. The Gog and Magog prophecy, Ezekiel chapters 38 to 39. Describes a future apocalyptic battle involving nations led by Gog of Magog. Interpreted by some as a literal or symbolic reference to a climactic confrontation between good and evil before the ultimate establishment of God's kingdom. Ezekiel and Babylonian exile overview. 3. Ezekiel and the End Times. 3. The New Temple Vision, Ezekiel chapters 40 to 48. Ezekiel describes a visionary temple and the return of God's glory to Jerusalem. Some interpret this as a literal rebuilding of the temple, while others see it as a symbolic portrayal of God's presence with his people in the Messianic age or the end times. Ezekiel and Babylonian Exile Overview. 4. Theological themes linking exile and end times. Judgment and redemption. The exile serves as a microcosm of God's judgment on humanity's sin and his plan for redemption. New covenant. Ezekiel foretells a time when God will give his people a new heart and a new spirit. Ezekiel chapter 36 verses 26 to 27. A theme often connected to Christian eschatological hope. Restoration of Israel. The return from exile prefigures the ultimate gathering of God's people in the end times. Ezekiel and Babylonian Exile Overview. 5. Babylonian exile is a foreshadowing of end times. The Babylonian exile is often seen as a type or precursor to eschatological events. Captivity reflects humanity's estrangement from God. Return and restoration symbolizes the ultimate redemption and restoration of creation. Ezekiel and Babylonian Exile Overview. 6. Modern interpretations. Jewish perspectives focus on the literal return of the Jewish people to the land of Israel and the rebuilding of the temple. The eschatological vision involves the coming of the Messiah. Christian perspectives. Many Christians view Ezekiel's prophecies as pointing to Christ's second coming, the final judgment, and the establishment of the new heaven and new earth. Gog and Magog are often interpreted in the context of Revelation. Revelation chapter 20 verse 8. Summary. Ezekiel's prophecies during the Babylonian exile address both immediate historical circumstances and broader, timeless themes of judgment, restoration, and the ultimate fulfillment of God's redemptive plan. His visions have influenced Jewish and Christian eschatology and remain central to discussions of the end times. Subscribe, share, like, hit that notification bell for more information. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up, and share it with your climate change friends and associates. Don't forget to subscribe, like, hit that notification bell for more information on Jesus and climate change every day, week, month, and year. Let me know in the comments your thoughts on the current information. Thank you for watching.